one of the major innovations that really affected the space was the safety pin. In 1849, the safety pin was invented. Before they were using just a pin, which was invented by a guy named Walter Hunt. I want you to guess what his occupation was.
Welcome to Behind the Shelf, a podcast about how everyday products are made. My name is Tarek.
And my name is Amar, and we are your hosts.
Today, we're going to be talking about a shitty topic, diapers.
Shitty topic. Well, at one point we all wore diapers.
Everyone, rightfully so, complain about how gross is changing for babies and diapers and having to do the cleaning and all of that. But I still remember and I hear my grandma complaining about how gross things used to be back in her day about changing diapers, because not only is it you have to deal with the shit that exists, but you also have to wash the stuff. A lot of the stuff was fabric at the time, not disposable like it is now. So
crazy.
How was your experience with that?
I'll give you a fun fact. Did you know in an average lifetime of a baby, they go through 6,000 diapers?
6,000 diapers.
6,000 diapers.
So the average age for babies to use diapers is usually up until 3 years old, I think.
Yeah, let's say 3.
So that's about how many diapers a day? Like
5 to 6 a day.
Yeah, so that's about right. I thought it was more, 5 to 6 a day. That's not bad. That's not bad. Honestly, it sounds horrible. You have to do the changing this many times every single day. That's a lot.
Yes, so I've heard so many stories that some babies like to, do their 1 and 2s on a clean diaper. So when you go to change a diaper and when you put a new one in, they do the business right away.
Right, and then you have to repeat the process. At some point, I'm sure as a parent, you get desensitized to how gross the process of changing diapers is, and it just becomes like a habit, just like you're cleaning your house or something like that. You just like
or
you do it.
just doing the business yourself. Same story.
So let's jump right in. So I would imagine diapers have existed with us as humans ever since humanity existed. I'm pretty sure the ancient civilizations, whether that's Egypt, Greek, every country had their own, or every civilization had their own variant of a diaper. What was it like back in the day? Was it like banana leaves? How did they wipe and clean?
Yeah, you're not too far off, but it wasn't banana leaves. So in the ancient times, they used moss, and what they would do is they would cover the baby's bum with moss, and then either they would put animal skins. If you're in North America or the Inuit and stuff, they would put seal skin at the bottom. And so they would use moss, and sometimes they would couple it with animal skins. And on the
seal,
sorry,
seal like the animal, the seal.
Seal like
that's that seal. Really?
Yeah, that's seal. And like in Europe and stuff, in the ancient times, they would use hides. They would use like animal skin as like a wrap.
So what's the purpose for using animal skin versus like a plant leaf?
Well, depends if they had access to moss. Most of them did. So they would use moss as absorbent material. And then if they use animal hides, it would just be like a cloth. Because remember, in that time, they used hides for everything, right? Hides for clothing, hides for shelter. And it was something they had access to. So they would use it as a diaper, and they would just have it on.
It's also probably, I would imagine, comfort and warmth also to keep the child protected as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, they're wearing fur and stuff. This is just for the 1s and 2s, so to say. And so they had that.
I would, yeah. What about the cleaning? Would they also reuse them? I would imagine they were more sustainable than we are now, right?
Well, I mean, how often did they have access to water? So it's not, they would just wear it. I mean, for an extended period of time, sometimes if they come by a river, they would just wash it and then they would wear it again. And I wanted to also talk about ancient Egypt, because we always just talk about these guys, and they're always amazing. They're so innovative. So I said used moss and animal skins. Ancient Egypt used softened papyrus. So if you recall, papyrus is they're the ancient version of writing paper, and so they
Hmm.
use softened papyrus. And later on, they're also the ones who used linen, but they started off with softened papyrus diapers.
So they already had some sort of a processing capability that they wouldn't use material as raw as other civilizations had, but it was some sort of a processing that they did to make it softer and more durable. That's interesting. So it wasn't natural, 100%
Yeah,
natural
so
material.
they just made so they took papyrus from it's from the leaves of the river in the Nile, and they used that for paper. But they also softened it with water, and they would pulp it, and then soften it with more water, and just wrap the baby in it.
That's fascinating. They were really innovative then,
Just next
even
level
for
stuff.
their time. So, at what point did we start to see this innovation, and what triggered that? And walk us through who's the Thomas Edison of diapers, I guess, and when did it get into fruition and all of that?
So let's talk about medieval times first, right? As we transition into the European methods in the medieval times, they use cloth. So this is where they started using cloth, just regular cloth. It wasn't specialized, just regular cloth stuff they're wearing, like just regular cloth. And as we transition into the 18th century, cloth diapers were commonly used. People stopped using hides, they stopped using moss. They were using cloth everywhere because it was at that time they had access to cotton, they had access to linen, and they had access to flannel. They would fold this on the baby and they would secure it with pins. So those little pin pricky pins,
Yep.
or they would use strings. So they would just make a hole, they would strings, and they would tighten it up, and that would
Wrap it.
be the diaper.
So it was obviously more industrialized at the time. They had access to material like cotton and other material that sustainable
Yeah.
enough that allows you to create a diaper out of it, but it was also not heavily processed as it is now, and it's not really engineered to the way we see
Yeah,
it
and
now.
they also had a hygienic issue because they would, well, keep that on for an extended period of time because water, I mean, water was costly. It depends on how high you are in the hierarchy of society. They would just keep it on for months. You would have rashes. It would not be as hygienic because it's just wash, right? Wash and put it back. Wash and put it back. It wasn't like they were buying new cloths every 2 days. And it's not like it is now with the sanitary practices. So that was the most common issue they were facing during the late 18th century.
So when were I'm gonna call them early versions of modern diapers start to come into the history pictures, and who are some of the major players in that space?
So one of the major innovations that really affected the space was the safety pin. You might not think so, but the safety pin did a lot for this industry. In 1849, the safety pin was invented. Before they were using just a pin. I don't know if you ever seen, it's just a pin, just the pin. But the safety pin creates safety is in its word. It's actually tucks into a cover, and it's a spring action, which was invented by a guy named Walter Hunt. I want you to guess what his occupation was.
Okay, you're asking me to guess. That means it's unrelated to this. I'm not gonna be able to guess.
He was a mechanic.
Mechanic.
He was American mechanic, and he
Interesting.
was very interested in fasteners, to fasten clips, stuff like that. And
Okay.
pins created a lot of safety hazards because even handling them, you get pricked. It wasn't the greatest of things. So he was very innovative, very curious guy, and he created the safety pin where it would have a spring load and it would then bounce into a cover, so it would be safe. And that was used for diapers. So instead of using pins or strings, they started using these safety pins to fasten diapers. So
So
fasten these cloths.
I would imagine how it's more convenient to use pins versus ropes, because then it's just apply it right away instead of having to wrap a baby with it.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And your answer to the first disposable diaper. So we are now coming into something you would use and throw away. In 1942. Now, this, if you recall that time, it's World War II. There was a big shortage of cotton. So companies all over the world, scientists all over the world were experimenting, trying to find solutions. And in 1942, the first disposable diaper was invented by a Swedish company called Polystrum. what they would do is they would take cellulose tissue and they would put it inside rubber pants. And so you would pull up these rubber pants with the cellulose cover and they would do their business and then they would throw it away. Now, as you can imagine, not very breathable.
Yeah, yeah, and also probably not very comfortable and tucked
Not very
in as much
comfortable.
as they are now. Yeah.
But at that time, it solved like a big thing, right? Because soldiers could use it, older males, females could use it, and of course, babies would use it. You would use it, throw it away, boom, on to the next thing.
So were they? That's a good point you bring here. So were they used by adults at the time during war? Because obviously you can now you don't need bathroom for longer period of time. Was that one of the use cases of that
One of the
diaper?
uses. One of the use cases was, yeah, in war where they're in the trenches, it's not really you're in the middle of it, they would sometimes wear this.
It actually kind of makes sense because you can't even if you're in the middle, let's say, of a forest or in the middle of a jungle, you can't do your business then even because that gives traces to the enemy that a human was there.
You're also in a vulnerable spot. Imagine you pulling your pants down in enemy territory trying to take your number two.
Yeah. Yeah, so the original disposable diaper was meant for adults and for soldiers essentially, and then it transitioned into children. Is that correct? Or
No, no,
toddlers?
it would just happen to be used by soldiers. It was supposed to be
For kid.
disposable diaper
For
for kids
Okay,
because of the shortage of cotton.
got it, got it. Never waste a good crisis, right? This is one of the
Yeah,
examples where the atrocities of World War II led to some innovations that we take for granted now. Okay, so we got our inventor. How did it? Walk us through some of the milestones that brought us to where we are now. And
yeah. So I can't continue without naming Procter and Gamble. In
yes, major player.
1961, P&G released Pampers. 1961. Now they blew up the game because they used absorbent materials never used before. In this particular application, they used wood pulp as a absorbent material in the diaper. They used the PU backing, so polyurethane backing, prevented leaks. It was more comfortable to wear, and it would be more absorbent. So it would just take it all in, and then once you're done, you could throw it away. Pampers.
That explains why they're to this day still the major player. And essentially they created the space for diapers that we're familiar with now in a more comfortable and more disposable format, but also more effective than it
Oh yeah,
was before.
even to this day, they have the highest share price globally in the world. Pampers, number one.
I think
You
they're
know who
yeah
number two is?
Pampers, the Huggies, I would imagine they're pretty big.
Huggies.
Huggies, yeah.
Kimberly Clark. The company Kimberly Clark owns Huggies. And those two companies own 50% of the global market share in diapers. 50%.
Wow, that's a lot.
Global.
That I mean, I can see it. I think it's even Pampers are even more popular globally. I think they're pretty everyone in the world. I feel like knows Pampers, but I still think there are to this day. I know countries like in India. I think is one of those countries that still use non-disposable diapers to this day because of obviously they're cheaper because you can reuse them and wash them, and also just there's a lot of poverty in India where some people don't have access to this day. So even though we
Yeah.
have access to it here in like a Western country, it's still not the case in a lot of other nations.
It's a similar deal to a lot of sanitary pads and stuff like that. They have the same kind of issue. They still use cloth, and then it leads to a lot of different issues like infection and rash and stuff. But yeah,
It's also the process of rewashing the stuff. Can you imagine, like, when you're using a cloth diaper, you have to wash it and clean it and boil it so you can reuse it again? I think the sanitary piece of it, obviously, that's a one concern, but I think the cleaning and handling this kind of stuff to get it to be reused, it's next level disgusting. But
no, you're true. It's so true. And before we move on, I want to talk about the word diaper. So I know when you think of the word diaper, you think, pull ups, you use it, you throw it away, right? But the actual word refers to the cloth itself, not to the baby item. And it comes from Greek. and it's in for the word diaperon, which refers to the actual cloth fabric. And this cloth fabric had these repetitive geometric shapes like tablecloth. And in England, that word started describing the cloth with this pattern on it. But as we approach the 16th century, the word started transitioning to the cloth wrapped on babies, diapers. And now we refer to, what the modern diaper is as diaper.
Okay, so what are some of the innovations? You just mentioned P&G or the Pampers. What are some of the innovations that brought the diaper to where it is now? Because right now diapers they're very comfortable. They have high absorption rate. They have like disinfectants in them. I think they have lotion in them. What are some of the innovations that brought it to where it is now and gave it the shape and comfort that we currently are familiar with?
Yeah, so I can't move on without mentioning polymers, and I'll tell you why. And super absorbent polymer, which is stands for SAP, not the SAP computer platform, but
The
the
enterprise
original.
system, no?
The original acronym was super absorbent polymer. It was invented in the 1960s and eventually was used in the 1980s in diapers. So this SAP, super absorbent polymer, was invented by two individuals who worked at Dow Chemical. Now this is an agricultural company, and they wanted to use it as agricultural applications for water absorption in agriculture. And this specific invention, this polymer, was eventually used by the diaper companies in 1980s, and it's used to this day.
What is the specific polymer that they invented that's used
Yeah,
in diaper now?
so sodium polyacrylate. So it's a type of super absorbent polymer, and
Okay.
because of this polymer, it allowed diapers to get thinner, and it increased the absorption rate of the actual diaper.
So let's talk about manufacturing. Walk us through some of the raw material that are brought into the factory, and then what is any conditioning or preparation that needs to happen, and then the processing that creates those diapers that we see now.
Yeah. So first step is the pulp prep. To this day, we still get pulp, except it's in fluff form. So it comes in these big rolls. So if you recall in our tissue episode, I said wood pulp is transformed. In that transformation process, for fluff pulp, they introduce air. They introduce a lot of air, and it creates compressed into these strips or these rolls. And they would use a baler and create these big fluffy rolls, and that's the raw material that's fed into a debaler in in this factory. And essentially, these rolls are shredded and mixed in with cotton.
So,
So
just to clarify here, so this is material that is received in the diaper factory, not made in the diaper factory. So the diaper
yeah,
factory
received
receives that
this.
roll.
Correct. This
Okay.
fluff pulp comes in rolls. The diaper factory is not making these rolls. They are
hmm
receiving it as a raw material.
And it's essentially a mixture of, is it just the wood and then they mix the cotton with it in that process, or does it come mixed in?
No, they would use this fluff pulp separately, and they would mix in with cotton at the factory.
Okay. Okay. So that's the main ingredient, if I can call it that. What other ingredients or raw material that the factory receives in, and then how do they process them?
Yeah, so SAP, which is the polymer we just talked about, comes in little pellets,
hmm
and they would melt it down, and they would put it through a roller, which creates sheets, these little thin sheets. And so the fluff material we just talked about, and this thin layer of SAP, they
hmm
get layered on top of each other, and they get compressed into a single sheet by rollers. These compression rollers compress it. Now you have a thin core formation. This core, which is essentially the middle of the diaper, is being now starting to being formed. So you have the fluff, you have the SAP layered on, and now compressed. And that sheet is ready to go into another process, which is the main process called layering.
Are there any water or liquid that is introduced into this pulp or the SAP material to help it to help handle it essentially and spread it? And you also mentioned spreading it, so that to me sounds like similar. Are we pressing it through a roller that gives it that even sheet that we see? It sounds similar
Yeah,
like to gum and similar to cereal. Is that similar
yeah.
technology?
So usually these processes are dry, but the SAP layering, the SAP thin formation, there's water involved in it. However, the fluff, you don't want water to be in that fluff material because you have now moisture in your diaper, which goes against the whole thing. You want a dry environment. So water is not necessarily added in some of these steps. But yeah, compression technology, they use rollers. So they use rollers as the sheet goes by. They use rollers to thin it out, to compress it even further into a single layer.
So the output of this process then is a sheet of that pulp mixed with the cotton that is pressed. Along on top of that, you have a sheet of that polymer that we talked about, covering it on top. Okay. How do you form it and cut it, and what other layers or material do they add to that?
Yeah, so we essentially used a top sheet and a bottom sheet, which is essentially a polypropylene or polyethylene layer. And it covers, these are the two layer coverings for the core we just talked about. And the core is placed in between these two layers. And they get edges sealed by ultrasonic sealing or thermal sealing.
So those are essentially the exterior layers that make contact. So the interior one will make contact with the baby skin, and then the outside one is the one that has the prints on it, and that's just exterior. So these are more containing the actual diaper and just for cosmetic, right? Do they have any functionality?
No, this core layer is the function. This is the gel. This is the absorption layer. This is that middle portion where the baby's bum's gonna sit. And ultrasonic sealing and thermal sealing just seals the edges. So now that whole edge sheet is now a complete sheet. And think of the output as a long rectangular strip, long one.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask. We didn't do cutting here yet, so this is just
we did not cut.
Okay.
Correct. This is just a sheet that's very long, and the sheet's edges are now sealed. So the layering is now sealed. It is a sealed layer now.
Okay, and that sealing happens obviously on the edges of that big sheet. So
correct.
What happens next? And trying to get to the cutting, because in my head, I have the diaper now. I gotta shape it into the look that I see and probably add spandex on it or something like that. So is that the actual next process, or they're curing? Or
next process is exactly it, is the elastic attachments. So for the elastic attachments, they use spandex or elastane, which is essentially bands. It comes in these bands. And don't forget, some of the diapers have adhesive taping. So the adhesive taping is also applied. Now, this is added usually where the leg openings are going to be and where the waist section is going to be. And so the raw material comes in big bands and it gets cut, and the machine then places it as a roller, places it right on the sheet where it needs to be. And the edges of that spandex or elastin is then ultrasonic sealed or thermal sealed on top of where it needs to be. So it's sealed on.
So if you're getting to apply the spandex and the bands, you're doing that to the big sheet or?
Big sheet, because think of unfolded diaper. Visualize unfolded diaper flat.
Okay.
That's what we're making right now. It is not folded. It is not laser cut. Those holes are not laser cut where the legs are going to go. Think of a flat sheet, diaper, not folded. Now you have placed the elastic or the bands and the adhesive taping on top of it. So edges, middle banding, side banding.
Got it. So that's essentially, so that means that sheet that you're talking about is big enough to make one diaper at a time when they do the cutting in it.
You're exactly correct.
Exactly correct. I was thinking that it's more they make hundreds of diapers from that one sheet, but it's essentially
So
one diaper at a time.
Like the size of my board. Think of this wide, very long.
Got it. So essentially when they do the cutting, you are doing one diaper after the other in series.
Correct.
So now it makes more sense to me. Okay, clear.
Correct. All right. And now your favorite part that you've been asking for this whole time, the final cutting. And automatic laser cutters cut the actual, edge shaping and in between the diapers. And now it is now the shape of a diaper. The banding around is now cut exactly to what the shape will be. And everything else is ultrasonic sealed and thermal sealed. So ultrasonic sealing, I don't know if we've mentioned it before, but I think we did. I think we mentioned ultrasonic sealing in our rice episode. But just to reiterate, ultrasonic sealing is sealing compressors. Uh, they do it so fast that they melt the material they're hitting.
Yeah,
And thermal sealing is heat banding. Heat is applied on like compressors, and they would just compress.
yeah, I think so. The way ultrasonic technology works, you're pressing against the object and then you're vibrating at a very high speed. That
Yes,
very the vibration is very subtle, so you will not see it in your naked eye, but that high speed vibration will generate heat that will then melt the material that you're trying to process. So
exactly.
essentially it gives you sealing capabilities without actual heat. The advantage of it, not only is it reliable, but also it allows you to seal things good without any actual heat.
Yeah, ultrasonic is the new golden standard for sealing nowadays. And I want to talk about recycling because, with the new sustainability initiatives a lot of companies have, I'm not sure if you've wondered what happens to all the material we just stripped off. What happens to all the stuff that was cut off? They use it again. They
Recycle.
recycle it. Yeah,
That makes sense. So
it's
they,
amazing. Yeah.
so that recycling piece after you cut out the legs and you formed your final diaper. But at this point you have the layers. Do they separate those layers or do they incinerate them, like melt them and
No, they would just they would crush it. And I don't know if there's a lot of like recycled diapers from recycled material,
Mhm.
and that's one of the SKUs. They would just reuse it in there.
Okay, so woohoo, we have a finished diaper.
Correct.
How does it pack? What are the quality checks that it goes through to make sure that this is specification? And what other process steps and safety measures that they take?
Yeah, so until now this is still flat. This is a flat diaper. You what do you got to fold this bad boy. So essentially what happens is goes through a conveyor, and almost like a guide arms pushes against the bottom edge. So now they're like folding over. They're folding over,
Hmm.
and then one by one, as now it's folded, it goes through another roller, which essentially compresses it, which thins it out. Because we're talking about very fluffy, very air dense material.
Mm-hmm.
And to pack it, just going to be a mission. So this roller essentially just pushes it,
Presses them.
makes it, presses down, and now you have flat folded thing. And now it goes into a single slot. So these slots are special. One at a time, these folded diapers get pushed into a slot. So now each one is in its own slot. So now the machine is able to count 10, 20, 15, whatever, because each material, each of those is in its individual slot. It goes into a baler. What happens is a set pushes into a conveyor, and they get pushed onto a pre-folded, already wrapped cover. You know, the huggies covers or
Yeah,
whatever, the
the bag
plastic.
that they come in, essentially.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it gets pushed in it, and then the two sides are sealed, thermal sealed. As it goes out, it gets ink jetted for the barcode, date code, whatever it needs to be, the lot number, and now you have a baled pamper or huggies or whatever the brand is ready to go.
Okay. So that sort of makes sense. So you're essentially taking it flat, folding it, pressing it, putting it in a slot to remain pressed as you're accumulating your pack, and then you're sealing this. You're putting this entire pack in a case. You seal it, and then you put it in a box.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. What quality checks that exist? And is there X-ray like we've seen in food manufacturing?
Yeah. So there are three main quality checks. One is visual inspection. So this is all the sealing in the right place? Is the elastic properly? Is it stretchable? Right? Are there any defects? Is the printing properly? Is the core sealed? Is it there? Everything just visually, integrity. Second is absorption test. You may have seen some commercials pour that blue liquid on the diaper, and then they're like, "Oh, look at
Yeah.
this! It's so absorbent." That test, ability to test and retain a moisture. So they have a certain spec on it that this amount of ml should be able to be absorbed without leaking. So that is absorption test. Third test is tensile strength test. I know we said this in the past. Essentially, they want to know the integrity of the actual diaper. Is it going to rip? Is it going to withstand some force? Essentially, as the parents are stretching it, they're trying to put their kid in it. The kid is pressing, holding. So there's a
Hmm.
certain load that it has to be able to withstand on stretching, moving, and they do tensile strength tests.
Okay, so I want to take us back a little bit. So I'm thinking of those prints that they have on the exterior of the diaper. They have their logo, the company logo, and they have like some cute prints for kids. At what point in the process do they make those? Does this come pre-printed from the supplier and they just use it, or does it get printed in the process?
Usually, it's always most likely printed within the factory. So when they're creating the top and bottom sheet, the sheets that are covering the core,
Hmm.
they print it on those sheets before it is assembled. So either they use laser flexi printers or they use continuous rollers which apply these patterns. And a lot of these patterns are trademark patterns. So third parties cannot, you cannot have this done somewhere else. They're done in house.
Okay, so before the layering of the diaper happens, you're essentially prepping those sheets with the print, and then when you do the layering, then they're already done. You just apply the
They're already
spandex,
done.
you form
Correct.
it, you do the cutting, and then the fold and the pack.
That's right.
You make it sound so easy. Like that sounds like it's a much easier process than a lot of the things that we've covered on this podcast. It seems like it's pretty quick.
Quick is an understatement. You want to know how fast these lines go?
Actually, that's a good, yeah. Well, how fast are we talking here? How many diapers a minute?
So when I was looking at this, 500 to 1,200 diapers per minute.
Wow. Well, that is fast.
Rapid lines. Rapid lines.
That is fast. That also talks to the demand in the space too, right?
Globally, this is happening. People, I mean, children use diapers all over the world.
And they're pooping all the time. Okay.
Pooping, peeing all the time. Yes.
So, okay, so that has been an interesting journey, I would say. I mean,
Yeah.
it's similar to other episodes where we see how something right now we're using, like the diapers, the early forms of it used to be plant leaves. It used to be. It was interesting for me to know that the ancient Egyptians had some level of processing capability to use the Piper's paper
Yeah.
as essentially diapers. That's essentially one of the early forms of manufacturing and industrialization that was happening at the time, if you think about it.
Yeah. They were
Animal skin,
basically.
I thought that was interesting too. They use animal skin at the time. And then I would not have guessed that a mechanic invented those safety pins that we now, that they essentially improve the safety of the diaper. Amar, thank you so much for taking us through this. I've learned a lot
Yep.
about diapers. And thank you all for listening to Behind the Shelf. Let us know what you think of this episode. Share it with a friend if you thought it was helpful, if you enjoyed it. Let us know if you have any suggestions about any other topics you would like us to cover. We would love to hear from you. In fact, this episode right here was a recommendation from one of our friends and listeners on this podcast. That's why we created it. So if you have any ideas
Yep.
about topics you want us to cover, let us know and we'll do that. And with that, my name is Tarek.
And my name is Amar. Have a great day.